and welcome to the 2020, sorry, I just got my "we are now recording" message. Hello everyone, and welcome to the 2020 David Riley Quizbowl Conference, hosted by the Partnership for Academic Competition Excellence. My name is Sam Luongo, my pronouns are he, him, and I am currently the president of PACE. Unfortunately, my sound has been having some issues, so hopefully you can hear me. To quickly cover our bases, I should note that while we are using a Washington University in St. Louis Zoom account to record this year, and you may see a logo in the recording, we are not affiliated with Woostle, and the views expressed at this conference should not be taken as a reflection of them. Further, unless noted otherwise, you should assume that the individuals you'll hear in this recording are speaking for themselves rather than any teams or organizations they may be a part of. With that out of the way, back to the business of this evening. This conference began in 2015 and is named in honor of David Riley, the former Quizbowl coach at Loyola Academy in Wilmette, Illinois. He was a tournament host, chair of the Illinois High School Scholastic Bowl Coaches Association, question writer, and PACE member. He passed away in 2015 at the age of 59, but his enthusiasm for Quizbowl has had a deep and lasting impact on our activity in Illinois and across the country. I met David digitally in 2012 when he won the Benjamin Cooper Academic Ambassador Award and accepted over Skype due to his illness preventing his travel to that year's tournament, and I believe he would be delighted as a librarian and a coach that we're able to come together digitally this year. I have long been a believer in the strength of the Quizbowl community. When I won the Ben Cooper Young Ambassador Award as a high school senior in 2010, I spoke at length about the community's willingness to help each other learn and grow as players, staffers, and tournament directors. A lot has changed in 10 years, both for me and the Quizbowl community, with much of that change for the better. However, we still have room to grow. In those 10 years, Quizbowl's gender gap has narrowed, but it is far from gone, and we continue to see widespread racial and economic disparities, especially at higher levels of competition, that many of us, PACE included, have not done enough to combat. Several of our panelists tonight have achieved success in coaching or playing for and outreach to schools and teams with smaller budgets, and I hope that the stories and strategies they're able to share will help the community continue to engage in this important work in new areas. I'm not sure that the topic of race in Quizbowl is something we're prepared to engage with tonight more directly than those strategies, but I'll take this moment to remind our panelists and our audience that while we should avoid speaking for groups we are not ourselves a part of, it is vitally important to speak with and listen to those groups, while also examining our own biases and assumptions. The bulk of the work in making Quizbowl a truly inclusive community belongs to those of us who already feel at home here. It is not the responsibility of marginalized groups to carve out their own space or do all of the work in educating the rest of the community. I invite you to think back on your own experiences, who might have been excluded from them, and why that may have happened. Could a woman on your team feel unsafe crowding into a teammate's tiny dorm room for a movie night with a bunch of guys she's only met a few times? Will a lower income player sheepishly flip through a menu looking for the cheapest option during your lunch or dinner break and wind up stuck with water and a side dish instead of a meal? Have you shrugged off the knowledge that campus police might show up while planning events you know will last later than your room reservations? Have you heard someone derisively say, "Oh, of course they'd get that question," while you were playing or moderating and said nothing? These are just a few examples of ways we can, intentionally or not, make underrepresented players feel like they don't fully belong in Quizbowl. And if we can notice them and recognize that they've happened, we can learn to keep them from happening again. We're recording this session on June 6th, and we'll be sharing it at a later date out of respect and solidarity for those who are currently taking a stand against police brutality and discrimination. Declining to take up space on social media in this moment is a very small thing we can do, and I look forward to participating in conversations both within PACE and with the larger community about more ways we can help. Those of us with power in this community, be we head editors, presidents of clubs and organizations, coaches, or other leaders, are used to teaching and sharing our expertise. It also falls to us to listen, to challenge our assumptions, and to continue to learn and grow as leaders in order to help grow our community. Regardless of your role in your team or the wider community, I urge you to listen to the Quizbowlers around you, to acknowledge and call out bias or hurtful speech when you see it and it's safe for you to do so, to reflect on and learn from your mistakes, and to remember that there is always room to grow. Thank you for being a part of our community tonight and always. From here, it's time for me to listen, and I'll hand things over to Fred Morlan, our experienced conference moderator, to introduce this year's panelists.
Hello, everyone. I'm Fred Morlan. I'm a former president of PACE, and we've hosted this conference a few times before. So I'm pleased to introduce this year's panel, and I would like everyone to introduce themselves one by one. But let's start with Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm from Salem High School. I'll be a senior this coming fall, and I've done a lot of work with just outreach to within schools and getting other teams involved that have been involved in leagues and stuff like that.
Next up, I'd like Matt to introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Matt Hasquin. I'm the coach at Southwestern High School, a small rural school in Piasa, Illinois. I'm also the chair of the IHSSBCA and have been in my third year now.
And next, Tora, please.
Hello, my name is Tora Husar, and I am a member of the University of Minnesota's Quizbowl team. I've been involved in Quizbowl for about 5 years now, and it's been a good experience for me to stay involved in the community and to form a strong bond always.
Next up, Chris Johnson, please.
Hi, I'm Chris Johnson. I am the Scholars Bowl coach at Itawamba Agricultural High School. It is a very rural school in Northeast Mississippi. I've been there for about 19 years, coaching for 19 years, kind of, sort of. Revitalized our state championship about 5 years ago and been director of that for the past 5 years as well. Tried to grow a lot of tournaments in our area, in a very rural area as we are. There's just not a lot of opportunities, and so I've been working for the past 6 years or so trying to grow the events in our area.
Next up, Ashish.
Hello, I'm Ashish Kumbhardare. I played for the last 4 years at Penn State University, where I served as the tournament director, reaching out to new schools. And last year I won the 2020 Benjamin Cooper Young Ambassador Award. So, yeah.
Thank you. Next up, Arjun.
My name is Arjun. I'm going to be a senior at Stevenson High School next year. I've been playing since middle school, and yeah, it's been really fun. I also do some things with Groger ranks.
All right, Erik.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, I'm Erik Nelson. I am a tournament director and writer and editor. I am the president of Play Quizbowl LLC, as well as the director of the Bounceback Foundation, a mental health awareness and outreach organization.
And finally, Ken.
Hi, I'm Ken Romeo. I am the founder and the head coach of Middlesex Middle School Quizbowl, which is the 2016 National Champions. And I am also a co-host of the Quizbowl podcast for 10 Points. And Ashish, we are.
Penn State.
Thank you.
We also have Athena with us.
Hi, I'm Athena, pronouns they, them, theirs. I'm just here for technical support. I'm at Whistle, was at UChicago, and I'm also on the board of Bounceback Foundation with Erik.
All right, and we'll go ahead and get our discussion started. Our first subject we're going to address is the outreach to smaller schools and outreach towards new circuits. So whoever would like to get started with those subjects.
I'd be happy to speak about it. We're from a small rural school, much like Chris, in South Central Illinois, about an hour from the St. Louis metropolitan area. And I had to come up here in order to have internet access in order to the school, in order to have internet access. That's how rural we are. I have a student population of about 460 kids, and we're averaging about 20 kids on the team each year. We participate in the South Central Conference and the South Central Scholastic League. So we're averaging about 150 matches a year. When I started 17 years ago, we would play about 20. And what we've been trying to do in the rural area is bring a Quiz Bowl flavor to Illinois Scholastic Bowl. It's been a rough transition, starting with pyramidal questions and good quality pyramidal questions. But having strong leagues and chairs and coaches who are willing to take on the responsibility, because the one thing that we try to focus on is having coaches and not necessarily sponsors. Sponsors tend to turn the kids loose, where coaches are actively involved in the growth of their teams, the management, the strategy behind practices. I've been fortunate to have some strong mentors here in Illinois to help me along the way. I was drug kicking and screaming into the Saturday tournament circuit. But boy, we've seen great success as a result. And then drug kicking and screaming into the question writing aspect for my players. And every time a new idea comes up, I'm not so hesitant to get on board anymore. The issue has been making sure that we can get good quality questions, a good stable of local moderators for our leagues to provide our kids with a great experience, and then we can begin to work on depth of knowledge issues, program growth, fundraising, community support, which we've been blessed with here at Southwestern. So the thing is, you can't be shy. You have to be willing to be your own advocate and do the outreach. If it's talking to, your local school board, but then also making sure that you're getting small businesses involved, because we really don't have the resources that other schools have. We're the biggest employer in our school district as a school. And then after that, it drops off to the local agricultural and feed and chemical company that's just down the road. So, but we've been fortunate to actually have receptive audiences and school boards in our area. And Illinois Scholastic Bowl with, that's basically what we call it south of Interstate 80. North of that, of course, it's Quizbowl, but we've been able to see a really good hybrid and good support from other schools as well.
And Chris, do you want to talk about a little bit, at least the rural aspect a little bit, because I believe you and Matt are the two most experienced people in the discussion right now.
Absolutely. My team played against Matt at Chicago, small school, I think year before this past year when we kind of lost the tournament. But anyway, yeah, what Matt said that I really liked is the concept of getting coaches and not just sponsors. When I started coaching in 2001, they came I had some of the kids, I teach the honors English courses and things. And some of the students came to me and said, hey, we want to go to more tournaments. Will you help us? And so we started looking around, and there was nothing for us. So we would, that first year that I started getting serious about it, we drove to Memphis, which is about a 2-hour drive. We went to Birmingham, we went to Nashville, we went to a little place in Arkansas, and we drove a lot for tournaments. And I started trying to pick brains of coaches, trying to figure out what it is that they are doing, because we were starting off brand new. I didn't have a clue. We played at Vanderbilt, Detroit Central, and they beat us 680 to -10. And my kids said, let's go home. We're terrified, And so I tried to figure out from that point, what do we need to do to build up the team? Well, as I have started in the past 10 years or so trying to get tournaments in our local area, and as I reach out and I call these other schools and I say, hey, I'll come and meet with you, I'll talk to your coaches, I'll try to give them that instance of that I didn't have, that insight rather. One of the things that I always try to remember when reaching out is there's going to be teams, like if they come to our tournament, I let my kids play because we don't have enough tournaments. At least they'll play one. We'll play one. And, we've been doing this for a while. We go to nationals. We were top 10 last year, last year, 2019. So, we're pretty, we've got, some skill, and we'll beat a team, 600 something to whatever. And that is really painful because I know what that kid and that coach is going through. But if you got just a sponsor, they're going to say, well, this is no good. We'll never be at that level. And so it's going to die out. And so I think when I construct tournaments now, I try to, I stole this idea from Vanderbilt, but we'll play about 2 or 3 games, and then I'll put all my good teams into one little bracket, and they'll just play the rest of the day, and everybody else plays, so that I can then, as tournament director, go and talk to the coaches and kind of coach them so that when they come back to our tournament, they'll have a better experience, and everybody leaves feeling, hey, I played teams like, similar skill level all day long. Because like Matt says, you want coaches, and not just sponsors, because they're going to get into their kids, they're going to build into the kids and give the kids that great experience of representing their school that other students all want.
I can, if you don't mind me jumping in, this is the first panel I've been on, so I don't quite understand the etiquette. So forgive me if I'm not doing this right. But as far as I couldn't agree more, Matt, Chris, about the difference of a coach versus an advisor or a sponsor. And like, you wouldn't think, like, there are no sports teams that have advisors, right? They all have coaches, and they all have their role, and we know how useful they are there. In Connecticut, there really wasn't much of a circuit when I started the program a decade ago. And so I literally emailed every school, every middle school within a certain radius to see, hey, are you interested in doing this? I'm starting a program. Do you want to try to just meet for a match? We'll try to figure something out. And I had one of those like field of dream moments. If you build it, they'll come. And I just decided I'll start a tournament, and if people show up, great. If not, then we're just going to play in-house. And it started with 8 teams, and 3 of them were mine. And a bunch of schools were just brand new to this. And I drove to the schools, and I met with the person who was willing to work with a team to get them ready to come play, and told them what we do as a program, and what the rules are, and all of that stuff. And it's grown into, I think our last tournament, we had 36 teams, and, a novice bracket and everything. And there are a bunch of schools in Fairfield County in Connecticut that exist because of what we started 10 years ago. So if you are a coach that is looking at not much around you, just have faith, go and build and reach out. But really, I like what Chris and Matt said. They're going to take coaches and not sponsors, people that are really willing to work with kids and guide them and help set up practice time and sign them up for tournaments and stuff like that. And I've worked with teams that just have sponsors, and they don't have that experience, and it's a shame.
Building on what Ken said, we've been hosting tournaments for a few years, and there's this one school, it's right on the Alabama-Mississippi line, but they had a kid who came to our tournament for 3 years. I give out all-star awards, the highest point scorers, whatever. I try to give as many opportunities to recognize kids as possible at every one of my tournaments. Well, one of the kids who was always on the top, 5 or whatever, went to Mississippi State University this past year, and then emailed me wanting to know, hey, we want to get a team started at Mississippi State again. And so that one little connection, and we're working now towards getting a team established on a university level, which is giving even more kids an opportunity to participate in this event, which I think is great.
If I can add to, one of the things I think we have to do as small school coaches is make sure that in Illinois, we can do this because the IHSA does recognize us, and we do have a state series, but we treat Scholastic Bowl as a sport. So you're in a varsity letter, you're treated you're up for this booster club scholarship and things like that. Coaches are paid on the salary schedules rather than being volunteers. And then we have a nice framework with the Coaches Association here, who provide the novice, the kickoffs, the turnabout tournaments that normalize what we consider to be quality play. So that way there is a trickle-down effect where when teams go back for other tournaments, there's expectations there of a high quality of play. But really, it's about, with small schools, it's making it, being a part of the culture of your school, trying to have it in the daily announcements, getting into the weekly newspaper, making sure grandma's got something to hang on the fridge whenever, the kids are doing well. For me as a coach, I treat the team as, it's another prep as a teacher. So I'm always preparing for it, but I also have to coach the boys track team, and I'm an assistant football coach because that's the role in small schools. You have to wear a lot of hats, but then what pool you're drawing from. And so as a coach, you can level those expectations upon kids, where in some of the larger schools like Stevenson, you may only have 10 kids maybe on your team, A team, B team, but you have such a pool to draw from. For us, I'm competing with the basketball team to make sure that my science kid gets the basketball practice, but I need him for leagues on Tuesday nights as well. And, he's doing double time, or she's a cheerleader, but they're in the pep band, but we're still working towards having a cohesive team in a small school setting.
Emily, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to build up on one quick thing that Matt said, and then I'll be quiet. The newspaper, for us, in a very rural area, I've tried, and I'm sure Matt does too, make sure that everyone in the community knows what Scholars Bowl is doing. I was at a wedding one time a couple of years ago, and someone came up to me and they were saying, "Hey, we're going to be good in Scholars Bowl this year." And I was like, wow, we're not the football team, but for years and years and years of trying to get people involved, get things in the paper, get people on TV, and I blast stuff on Twitter like crazy. If we're at a tournament, every game, and my superintendent, who is great, he retweets it. And then, we'll get this, that, and the other. For a small school, we have to toot our own horn so much. And if you don't do that, your team's going to just crumble, because there's no energy involved. But these kids deserve just as much. And I love the fact that Matt's school, Southwestern, there is able to do that. We don't have anything like that.
I envy that recognition from
paid.
from the board, from the superintendent. I envy that. We don't have that here in Darien.
Emily, you play in a fairly rural area. Could you talk about your experiences from that standpoint?
Yeah, definitely. So one big difference between we compete in the Virginia High School League, and prior to my joining the team 3 years ago, the only thing my team did every single year, we played our VHSL matches, scored about 50 points a match, and then went home and did nothing. One big issue in an area like this is you have so few tournaments and tournament directors that one bad tournament or one bad TD can completely ruin the experience for several teams for several years. So if you get a team that's been playing like state league for 15 years and someone manages to drag them out, and then they play 8 games and they lose all of them, and if they come home, and what gives them the incentive to come back? It's definitely important to make sure that these schools know what they're getting into. And another thing that's very important is to try to make sure, this is more towards head editors, to make sure that sets are appropriate for the regions. A Nats minus high school set should not be used as a fall event where the best performing team ends up getting 12 PPV on it out of 9.
Shifting subjects just a little bit, let's talk about spreading Quizbowl into new circuits. So you want to have any experiences they'd like to share with that, and any opinions on how to best effectively do that?
Well, I coordinate 2 leagues. We have one league with 10, which is our regular school conference, our athletic conference, but we also are part of a 16-team fall Scholastic Bowl league where we play 4 consecutive quads, then a JV and varsity tournament. And when I first brought the team into the league, we were about 8 teams. We've expanded to 16, and now we're having people knocking on the door wanting to come in. And I think a large part of that is we've been able to grow good quality officials and moderators, mentor coaches, especially young coaches. Scholastic Bowl is a high turnover position within small schools. And we have big schools now wanting to come in, and the small schools aren't ready for them to come in yet. But making sure that you've got good, solid moderator cores, understanding, the different formats. We play so many different formats with, NAQT formats or the ACF format, the Illinois State format. But regardless, making sure that we can have that outreach. So through our Coaches Association, we do have liaisons from the conferences that are responsible for maintaining communication with the schools and their leagues and conferences. That's been a nice way to kind of farm out what we need to do as a state association so we can continue to provide a quality experience for the kids. But like Chris said too, you know, we need to make sure that we're following through and getting exposure and attention brought to our athletes, and so they can get the recognition they deserve. You know, it's not just the all-star teams that need to have the recognition. You know, sometimes you need to bring in the player spotlights, having these things brought up at your conferences through your administration. And then, you know, we've had some good luck this year since we didn't have a state tournament and weren't able to attend nationals. Brad Fisher's been putting out a spotlight on the all-state team from Illinois this year for Class A and Class AA, and we're able to let kids tell their stories. And it's nice to see those things expand on social media and continue the outreach. It's something you can't be complacent about, though. If you want to continue the growth of our activity, we've got to be active in it. We can't just rest on what we've accomplished. We've got to get out and be, I don't want to say aggressive, but like I said earlier, advocates for what we really care about.
Ashish, I think you were going to add something.
Yeah, I was just going to add that you never know when you're doing outreach that where you're going to get your next hit. So it's also important that when you're sending out emails to for the first time to new principals or new administrators about potentially starting a team, that you don't want to leave out any teams that are from schools that are either too small or are performing poorly. Because some of my kids have been from areas or schools that wouldn't necessarily, you would think, have a good Quizbowl team or any Quizbowl team. So I think also one of the more important aspects is you want to try and do it as much as possible. Part of my outreach, I was very fortunate to go to a big name state university that had a lot of teachers and potential coaches be alumni, like maybe Ken earlier, that went to Penn State. So it's a good opportunity for them to come back, show their students, hey, this is Penn State, this is where I went to, while also showing them a good Quizbowl tournament on the side. And that's also something that's could be expanded upon.
Sorry about that. Anyone else with any thoughts on just in terms of recruitment of new teams?
When one thing that's important, like if you're in a state like in Virginia, we have a large majority of schools that only do their conference stuff and then never do anything, never touch the buzzer again the rest of the year. When reaching out to schools like this, you need to be very specific to explain to them like what the format is, the differences in the rules, because there are stark contrasts that most people don't understand. And I've run into the issue personally where I've had coaches be like, oh, we don't go to Saturday stuff because it's not a real Quizbowl tournament, and it's very important to explain like the differences between formats and that there exists tons of different formats, and just because it's not exactly the same, it's still a valid way to play the game.
I guess in terms of like the local Illinois circuit for Stevenson at least, we're very lucky that the IHSSBCA and Masonic means that a lot of the local teams in our area have at least some exposure. And we also are fortunate that we have enough established programs in the area, like in the northwest suburbs, like not just Stevenson, but also like Loyola and New Trier and other schools, so that there's enough for a standard division and a competitive division. So even if the teams had only been used to playing conference Classic Bowl or Masonic, they have a way to like dip into like pyramidal Quizbowl without having to play like some of the more experienced teams. I guess like when like going outside of just the Illinois circuit, John Groger, who played for Miami Valley, he's going to Columbia next year. He had like this idea for what we could do with Groger ranks, because we're having a lot of excess money from running online tournaments, and he had the idea of where we basically sort of find local areas that would want to host a Quizbowl tournament in areas where they wouldn't have as many teams. But the main thing that's preventing from hosting it is because they don't have enough funding from the administration, and the cost of running the tournament would be too much. So what we're planning to do next year, assuming that the pandemic allows for tournaments to still happen, is that we would allow schools to fill out application forms, basically saying how much they expect their tournament to cost and what they would use the money for. And we'd cover all of it, since we have quite a few excess funds, since we didn't get to spend some of them on helping originally used it to help teams to pay for nationals, but obviously that did not turn to be a cost we had to cover. Another thing that we've been doing, which we are not going to do now for obvious reasons, is that we've been emailing schools that have been doing other competitions like academic decathlon and science bowl, but have not transitioned to pyramidal quiz bowl, since these are the type of schools which might have been obsessive about the idea of academic competitions. And traditionally there might be this sort of schools that would have done quiz bowl anyways. So they seem like an easy demographic to transition to easily, since without overgeneralizing here, they would also tend to have the funds to attend more tournaments to start with. And then from there, the local circuit can handle to reaching out to, as was mentioned before, the teams you would never expect, quote unquote, to attend a tournament. So a combination of reaching out to the teams that you would expect to be there, and then paying so that tournaments could be run in underrepresented areas, I think is going to be our approach to outreach now.
The Minnesota circuit has for years been, honestly, probably even decades, been kind of specific to the Twin Cities, and Outstate has been a stronghold for Knowledge Bowl, which is another format that's pretty different from Pyramidal Quiz Bowl. And this past year, after trying to varying degrees for years to encourage out of state schools to try out the format and the community that we have in the Twin Cities, we had a bit of a breakthrough this year over the winter, and what it ended up taking was basically just running a tournament for free, setting up everything and just saying, we will feed you, we'll kind of show you the ropes, we'll get some of our best staff to come kind of show you how it works, and you see who would show up and be willing to give it a try. I don't know that, if I'm being honest, we've always used the best approach, and I would love to know from Ken or from others who have kind of created circuits in more rural areas what the pitch sort of is, because a lot of times we've said, yeah, these tournaments are national championship qualifiers, or they're things like that, and for whatever reason, I don't know that the more rural schools have always gone for that. So I would be curious to know what is your pitch to schools when you are trying to create a new circuit or expand an existing circuit, that sort of thing.
Sure. The pitch isn't you're pitching to teachers, and teachers, they're educators, they care about the kids. The pitch isn't about national championships or anything like that, because people outside of our sphere really don't know what we do and how we do it, and why what we do matters so much. But if you're talking to a teacher who cares for their kids, you can pitch to them how this builds teamwork and self-worth, and how you can make something that is all inclusive in everything. Especially in middle school. I don't know, the people on the panel, I don't know how many of us really enjoyed our middle school years, but it's not very common. Okay, I could see the look on Emily's face. Yeah, it was strange, but Quiz Bowl was there for me when I was in middle school, and that's what I looked forward to for our practices. And so when I pitch it to other middle school coaches, I talk about the kids who were going to be included in this program, and how at Middlesex, like it just made their middle school experience so much better, that they can find like-minded individuals and work towards a common goal and build friendships that will last way beyond 8th grade. And so that's the pitch that I've used when I've tried to talk new teams into being.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is Quizbowl is very much a way, especially for middle schoolers, where really your only options are sports for extracurricular activities in a lot of places. It gives a lot of kids that might not necessarily have that otherwise a home where they can be themselves and be around friends that are similar to them and just have fun.
One thing I'll add to that middle school element is that it helps to try to form a team through a gifted ed program that exists at that middle school, if there is one. A friend of mine and I helped restart a middle school team within our school district during my senior year by working through that gifted ed coordinator who my friend knew after having gone through that middle school. And the same thing was done at the other 2 middle schools within our district by someone else. And I think it really helps, if there isn't an active team, to try to form that connection through existing systems within the school who may be willing to sponsor that activity.
That brings me to another subject I'd like to touch on. We do have a break coming up in about 10 minutes. But speaking of going from middle school to high school, and also we could also talk about the transition from high school to college as well. Does anyone have any suggestions on how to increase retention between those two transitions, or what could be done by outside people to make those transitions more welcoming to people that are undergoing those switches? Moving up between schools.
So I'll start, because when I was asked to be on this on the panel, I was thinking, this is for high school coaches. I don't know what the heck they want to hear from me from, but this was a topic that was brought up. And what I found interesting was that when Sam contacted me, he said that there were problems with middle school players who were good in middle school and then going on to high school and struggling with high school level questions. And I honestly found that surprising. So I actually, with all my free time, I went back and I looked at statistics from players who were on playoff teams in MSNCT, in NAQT's middle school championship, who were significant contributors at the 8th grade level, and then how they performed in 9th grade. And I certainly won't say like this was some like actual scientific study or anything like that. I won't go that far, but I didn't really see. First of all, I noticed a couple of things. Everyone's story is different. So people would go to a high school, and sometimes they were expected to be on the A team right away, and they struggled, of course. And then it was kind of cool to see someone who started off on a D team and then by the end of the year moved up to the B or A team because they're dedicated. They really put their effort into it, and they improved throughout the course of the year, which was kind of cool. But there wasn't so much of a correlation between how they performed in middle school sets versus how they performed in high school sets. The closest thing I found was students that powered a lot of toss-ups in MSNCT tend to score well on high school level difficulty questions, whether it's ISA or IS, because they were all NAQT's statistics, and that's all I had to go on. So there was actually a pretty strong positive correlation between how much they powered MSNCT questions versus how they did in high school sets. So I'm curious to hear the rest of the panel from high school players and coaches, if you have seen students who were really good at middle school Quizbowl and struggled in high school.
Well, I am the middle school and high school coach at my little school. I started the middle school team about 6 years ago, simply because we went to nationals and got destroyed. And I said, there's no way I can get students prepared for a high school national setting in 3 years. I got to start working with them in 6th grade. So I went down to our middle school and I said, hey, I'm going to start practicing on Wednesdays. And I've noticed in that time, the middle school kids, if I start at 6th grade, I can get probably 40 kids to show up for a practice. They're all excited. But then you start seeing some of that wane as they start, and that's a nice cat, Fred. You start seeing some of the enthusiasm wane as they don't do as well. You know, but it's the same thing. I've coached basketball before. It's the same thing. Middle school basketball team will have 1 billion people try out. You'll have 4 kids on senior night, you know, by the time they, you know, just kind of, you know, shake out a little bit. But the thing that I've found to get the most retention is take them to tournaments. Let them have fun. If they go to tournaments and they're seeing and it's fun, this becomes, you know, at least in my school, this becomes their friend group. My Scholars Bowl kids come in at my classroom at lunch. I'll have 20 kids in my classroom and they're all eating lunch. It's all my Scholars Bowl kids. And some of them will say, hey, Mr. Johnson, will you read packets for us? I'm like, I'm trying to eat here. But, you know, that's the way that I've seen it, because if they know you're pouring yourself as a coach into them on taking them to tournaments on Saturday, you get them involved in the tournaments that you host or that I host or, you know, whatever, you're going to see kids get involved in the program, and that becomes their identity. Because a lot of times what we're trying to do, and I think it was Tora who said about the gifted ed, because that's exactly how I funneled all of that, because I'm gifted ed teacher too. I would go down to the middle school, and because some of those kids, those are the prime kids you're going to lose as far as their enthusiasm for school, you know, or whatever. But if they can find that clique, that niche, you know, where they can go in, they can use their talents, and instead of maybe being ostracized, if that's, you know, something that might be happening in the school, they instead can be celebrated, because again, I'm going to work hard, and a good coach is going to work hard to get their kids some pub. And so to me, that's how I've seen the best as far as retention. And this past year at my senior banquet, I had 7 kids that were seniors, and every one of those started with me in middle school.
Anyone else with anything to add?
I would say like there's also kind of a gap, I'd say. So like it probably differs based on circuit. Like in North California, for example, I'd assume many of the middle schoolers continue on in high school just because there's so many Quizbowl tournaments, and there seems to be like this very competitive mindset amongst the kids here, which translates well into Scholastic Bowl. But like I guess, for example, like from my middle school, my junior high school, like Stevenson has always had a very established program, and my junior high school has always had established for ISA especially, but we like, the first time we went to an NAQT tournament was my 7th grade year. The first time we attended nationals was my 8th grade year. So I guess an advocate, like some of the people from advocacy who might have played Scholastic Bowl then, they might not have known like how many tournaments, how much of a commitment this would be, or what even quote unquote like real Quiz Bowl would feel like, because there just wasn't that many opportunities for middle school. So aside from like the local Barrington Invitational, which is run by Mr. Price every year and always gets really good turnout amongst teams that might not play any other tournaments. So I think just the idea of being used to like what Quiz Bowl tournaments are when you're in middle school helps a lot to like make the transition to high school, because in high school, at least for us, like there's a lot more tournaments you can attend, and like not just a difficulty gap, but like it's much more of a time commitment. In middle school, you could just like play some games, and then like you basically have heard most of the canon, quote unquote, that comes up. And high school, there's actually some extra work that's usually required. So I'd say like the best way to help for retention between middle school and high school is like to make sure they can sort of get the experience of what playing a lot of tournaments feels like.
By the way, shout out to Arjun for beating Middlesex in 2017 at MSNCT. We finished 3rd that year, and you guys beat Mounds Park in the finals, right? That's right.
All right. Anyone else that wants to share a quick thought before we take a break? All right. We're just going to go ahead and take a short 10-minute break, and then we'll reconvene and go from there. Thank you all. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the David Riley Coaches and Players Conference. I'm Fred Morlan, your host, and I'm going to have the panel reintroduce themselves just in case you're joining us for the second hour and it's been a little bit. First of all, we'll start with in reverse order on my screen. Arjun, if you could introduce yourself.
My name is Arjun. I'm going to be a senior next year at Stevenson High School.
Okay. Ken, could you introduce yourself?
My name is Ken Romeo. I am the head coach and founder of the Middlesex Middle School Quizbowl program in Darien, Connecticut, and the co-host of the For 10 Points Quizbowl podcast.
Erik?
I'm Erik Nelson. I'm a tournament director and writer, editor. I'm the president of Play Quizbowl LLC and direct the Bounceback Foundation mental health organization.
Emily, please.
I'm Emily. I'll be a senior at Salem High School in Salem, Virginia this fall, and I've done a lot of outreach as well as hosting the 2020 Internet Charity Tournament and directing several other online tournaments.
Matt?
Hello, I'm Matt Hasquin. I'm the coach at Southwestern High School in Piasa, Illinois, and I'm also the chair of the Illinois High School Scholastic Bowl Coaches Association.
Ashish?
Hey, I'm Ashish Kumbhardare. For the last 4 years, I was a player at Penn State, and last year I served as the tournament director of the Penn State Quizbowl Club.
Tora?
Hi, I'm Tora, and I'm the current president of the University of Minnesota Quizbowl team.
And finally, Chris.
Chris Johnson. I am the coach at Itawamba AHS and the state director for our state championship in Mississippi.
And finally, Athena Curran is with us. She is helping out on the technical side. Athena?
Yep. Hi, I'm Athena. Pronouns they, them, theirs. I'm a student at WashU St. Louis, and yeah, I'm here for tech. I'm also on the board of Bounceback Foundation with Erik.
Thanks. All right, everyone. Where we left off last time, we were kind of talking about transitions between different schools and different levels of play, and I think we've handled the middle school to high school one with some depth, but we didn't really get into the high school to college one. So I'm going to bring that back up, and we'll get started there, and whoever would like to take the floor, it's yours.
I can start. One thing that is probably the biggest barrier to transitioning from high school to college is that in most high school teams tend to have a stronger support system from their organization. So most high school teams will at the very least have a sponsor, if not a full-out coach who handles a lot of the organizational tasks involved in leading a Quizbowl team. Whereas at the collegiate level, very rarely will you see a full-out coach leading a Quizbowl team. Occasionally there will be a sponsor who helps coordinate financial issues with a collegiate team, but leading the collegiate team is really, falls on the students, particularly since most Quizbowl teams will be student groups like any other. And I think this is particularly hard if you don't have an existing college Quizbowl team at your university. There's a lot of administrative tasks that are involved in just starting up a team and organizing it from the start. And if you don't already have that system in place, it can definitely be hard to get that set up. I'm very lucky to be at a university where the team has existed for, I don't know, probably at least 15 years, but I think this is definitely something very noticeable at other smaller colleges in my circuit where the team will tend to die off if players who are very involved with organizing the group graduate. So I think one thing that is a really important network to have in college, among college teams, is to really get to know other collegiate teams in your circuit. This is something that I've been trying to get started with Nina Kaushikar from Carleton College to not only get to know to stay in contact with leaders of Quizbowl teams who attend tournaments in the Minnesota area, but to also try to coordinate things like when you schedule tournaments or what sets you will and won't play. Because if you don't have a lot of interaction, not only with administration in your own university, but also, but neither with other teams in your local area, I think it can be very hard to maintain that level of organization, particularly because I think most people's college experience tends to be very busy, and it can be hard to have, to dedicate that amount of energy to leading and organizing a team.
I think particularly reaching out to other collegiate teams for advice would be very helpful. One of the things that I guess I would recommend is having a localized Discord server, per se, so that both high school teams and high school students and college students alike can go through, can post in there and see like, hey, who's coming to which university? Would you like either be interested in joining a making a Quizbowl team or joining our existing team there? So yeah, that's another way that you could possibly increase retention.
I want to give a quick shout out to the University of Minnesota in particular for their work on Ginvit, or Go for Invitational, which is basically it is a high school tournament run by the local college to, one, give kids another challenging event to do, but also to kind of build that bridge to saying, okay, you're doing this now, in a couple of years, you could help, you'd be on the other side of this. So having things like that has, at least locally, been a big help as well. And it's always really cool to see. There's always a decent number of like local high school Quizbowl kids who will show up as players at a collegiate tournament down the line, or helping out as a moderator, that sort of thing.
Anyone else with any thoughts on the subject? Okay, in that case, we're going to move on, and I'd like to talk about inter-school outreach next. Any thoughts on that subject and how it can apply to different groups of potential participating students?
So this is something I've spent a lot of work with myself. We went from a team my sophomore year that was going to have 2 kids, which means because of our state regulations, we have to forfeit every single match the entire year because you can't run a team with less than 4 kids. And I came up with a plan to actually get students involved at a young age before they get bogged down with other activities, because that's one of the biggest things here. We have kids that are drawn by the marching band, the forensics team, robotics, all sorts of stuff. So what I've done is at the end of every single school year, I go around and speak to every single freshman and sophomore level teacher at the high school and ask them for students, describe like the kind of student that might be interested in Quizbowl, the one that's like always inquisitive and asking questions and asking why. And then getting a list of names from all these teachers. And I do this with the 8th grade teachers at the middle school as well. And then I write a personalized letter for each student, and there's a template that can be found on the forums in the Best of the Best section under the forums post, My Guide to High School Outreach. And I give this letter to every single student. I have it hand delivered. And then we have a meeting sometime in May, and I bring all the kids in. We talk about it, read a packet so they can get their first buzz on like an easy question. And then I bring them back in the fall, and we went from 2 kids to like 16 in a year with that. And one thing that I'm like extremely particular with Quizbowl, especially because it's so accessible, is pointing out that it's for low-income students or students that might not have the most opportunities. This is a place for you, because to get good and to get invested at this game, all you need is an internet connection, and if you don't have that, I'll give you a thumb drive with 1 million packets on it if you want to read that. And Quizbowl can really serve to do better in reaching out to these groups for various reasons that I can address later or now.
Feel free to. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is something that needs to be approached in a way that's never been approached before. You've done in Quizbowl solving our issues. Low-income and underprivileged students, it's not a race and a gender issue only. It's just a completely different layer. If you have students that are coming from first-generation backgrounds or very low-income students, like the students that are on free reduced lunch that qualify for Pell Grants, extremely low income, to show these kids that like these kind of things matter and you can have fun, and it's just very important to show that can be a place for you. And it's very important to be aware of like any like classism and try to like remove those biases. But also when like targeting students and like when you go to tournaments, you know, you have a kid that might not want to go to a tournament because he doesn't know how he's going to pay for the $5 lunch or the $10 lunch, or can he afford, do students have to pay a share of the tournament fees? And for situations like that, reach out to your local parent PTA association. They oftentimes have funds, so low-income students can be involved in these activities, which is something I've taken advantage of throughout high school. And then if your PTA can't help, go to your principal, your school board, and if you run dry there, reach out to your local Lions Club, your Rotary Club, and other local civic organizations to help get these kids involved, because it's vital to increase the visibility and access.
If I can add a few things. One of the things that we work on here is when we have tryouts, we don't have cuts. And so everyone's welcome. And then what we'll do is we'll have multiple sessions for practices and get-togethers. Because we're a rural community, we depend a lot on the busing for students to arrive. So we'll have practices from 7:30 to 8:15 in the morning, especially for young people that can't drive. We have a rule where let's make one a week, and then we offer 8 sessions for them to come in and get a practice in. Most of the kids will attend multiple ones. And one of the downfalls of a rural school is we also require an activity fee where students have to pay to play, not just Scholastic Bowl, but all the sports. So it's $100 a kid. And that can be prohibitive because they have to pay that before they can play. Fortunately, we have some angels in the community that have always approached me and said, if you have a kid that can't make it, we'll make sure that they're going to be on the team, no questions asked, and it'll all be on the down low, I guess is the best way to put it. But when it comes to those other issues, lunches at tournaments and stuff, I've always got a slush fund available for kids. They always know that, you know, we can count on each other to get those things taken care of, because the most important thing is we want them to be, you know, comfortable. We want them to be comfortable in their surroundings. We want them to focus on the competition and lay all those other things aside, because we want, you know, tournaments and competition to be a safe place for them. And we're not going to draw attention to the status that they may be under. And it's been a unique experience for us, and I've been very proud at the way our small community can respond to that now. They do so, you know, they'll buy a kid a pair of shoes for the basketball team or whatever, but it's nice to know that, you know, we may do a fundraiser, we do a local trivia night, team trivia night, and we'll make $4,000 or $5,000, and that can fund our season, all of our tournament fees. The district helps us with transportation, and we get by. And it's nice to know that we can accept everyone that wants to be a part of what we do.
Like when it comes to that too, it's also important to like address any issues of culture on your team that I mentioned earlier. So if like your existing team, make sure that people aren't being rude or derogatory. This stuff can kind of fly under the radar, but it's huge issues in everything, in all activities across all spectrums. So being very specific, and as a coach or as a player, as a captain, especially since you're often a peer, be a person that your teammates can talk to and be like very clear about the fact that if you have any issues or if anyone is just being rude or demeaning because of who you are, that they can come and talk to you, and please stamp out any issues like that as soon as they start, and don't let them persist, lest you risk driving kids away.
And one thing I could actually speak from experience here is that if you're a coach, you need to make sure you're aware of these issues, because I mean that's step zero. If you're a coach and you aren't aware of this being an issue with a player or players on your team, then you aren't going to be able to take the steps needed to address it, and you need to be aware of your players, not just like which questions they're getting right, obviously, but also like what's going on with their personal lives. And I think that's a big aspect of coaching that isn't really talked about much, in general, and it's something that needs to be kept in mind. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share on interschool outreach, especially to different groups of students, but in general is good too?
I will add, to build on what Emily said about reaching out to the 8th graders. If you're a high school program, going into the middle schools, we're a middle school program, and we just this past Thursday did our elementary school tournament where we reach out to the 5 elementary schools in Darien that feed into Middlesex. So they come in with some knowledge of who we are and how we do things and how everything works. A couple of years ago, we started a Quizbowl camp over the summer through Darien Summer School. That's specifically meant for rising 6th and 7th graders, just to get basics. It's not an advanced thing. It's not like the Texas Quizbowl camp or anything like that. We're not trying to compete with them because I don't have the expertise to teach any of that stuff. But the whole point is to kind of keep our our factory moving. I don't know how else to put it, but yeah, that's the goal. This year though, with the fact that everything is online, everything's virtual, we've opened it up to people from around the country, and it's cool that we have students from Texas and Alabama and Pennsylvania and Kentucky and stuff that are going to be joining our camp. So a little added pressure, but I'm looking forward to it.
And I'll just drive home the point one more time. It's like in Quizbowl, we talk a lot about like making it a more inclusive space for others, but it's very specific that a lot of work hasn't been done within the past is making sure that it's accessible to like low-income students, so that these students aren't being left behind. It would be a perfect fit and a perfect place for them. And like one of my goals with my own team is, for the kids on my team, my teammates, to have, 2 to 3 hours a week where they can, escape the hell that is their lives and just be them and have a safe space to do that. And regardless of your background or whatever you're dealing with, like it's important to have that kind of space.
I think especially from a tournament director's point of view, that you could also potentially be prepared to offer discounts that you would more discounts that you would normally give to maybe get these schools to go attend your tournaments. And even when picking a question set, new teams outside of the traditional core topics such as English, math, science, they're going to have a tough time on subjects such as fine arts, literature, some of the social sciences. So you might not want to pick a set that has tons of social science, philosophy, fine arts, because for novice teams, those kinds of questions are difficult, but especially for low socioeconomic students, it's much harder to convert these kinds of questions. So I think a good idea would maybe be having study guides of sort to like what Scott does. They're very baseline, and they give a very good baseline of information of each of the subjects.
It might also be worth mentioning too for like tournaments, like if you're a tournament director and you provide lunch at your tournament, like let's say you sell 2 slices of pizza and a soda and a drink and a bag of chips for $5, reach out to coaches ahead of time if you're able to absorb this and say like, do you have students that have this kind of need and that are having to worry about this? And in like your registration packet that you give students, perhaps like make a coupon or like a meals coupon that the coach can give to the student after they get the registration package, so that they can go through and get lunch and just hand that over to the person with the cash box, so it's not embarrassing or doesn't call attention to it, and they're able to eat and play Quizbowl.
Fred, you're muted. Fred, you're still muted. Nope.
It's okay, Fred. We'll edit this out in post, so don't worry about it. I sometimes people just leave Zoom and then come back and it works. I don't know if that'll work for you.
There's static, but we can't hear you.
Me, I can't hear you. I was going to make that exact same comment. No, I still can't, unfortunately.
While we're waiting for Fred to come back in, did anybody else have more to add about how we can support lower SES students, or how we can reach out to those kids within our own schools?
Our school.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of magnet schools in Quizbowl that draw from a lot of areas. I attended one, and it wasn't unusual to have a wide variance in SES within the same school. And I imagine that's also true of smaller schools where you might have one high school in your county.
Maybe not.
And to make sure that you aren't just catching the upper end of your socioeconomic status in recruiting for your team, and make sure that you're not missing anybody who might be a great player or might just really enjoy the game because of any assumptions that you're making.
Yeah, so that's one thing I've handled. A lot of people in the past have talked about, like, talk to the honors teachers at your school. But for whatever reasons, kids might not have filtered into those. So I've always made the point to speak to literally every single teacher that teaches freshmen and sophomores, because there might be that kid that, just didn't make it in the honors history for whatever reason, but it's like really, really on the ball. And I had a student like that last year that ended up falling in love with it and is now an amazing player and has a great time.
One thing that we've been successful in doing is getting corporate sponsorship within our community. That's helped a lot. We've got a construction company that every year has given us $1,000, which I then put into our fund, and I use specifically for the students who need a little assistance, because we do a lot of traveling to find good tournaments, teams that are more comparable to the level that we compete at. So, $40 hotel room, you put 2-3 kids in, you need about $40 for the hotel and stuff. I use that to kind of help some of those students take care of some of those funds. And another thing that I've been able to do that some of the schools might be interested in is our student council. They are very good at fundraising throughout the year. They have a little bit more of a opportunity to raise funds, and I've been able to solicit some assistance from them as well. So there are organizations usually within your school. I know mentioned the Rotary Lions and things like that, but there's a lot of people who are willing, especially if you're giving those kids good pub. They want their community to look good, they want their school to look good, and they'll be willing to write a check that you as a coach can wisely use to assist those students. Because at our school we're 70% free reduced, and so just about everybody that I have is going to be in need in some way, where I will overschedule. If I'm not careful, I will overschedule mom and dad's budget, and so I know I have to as a coach find a way to supplement that for the students.
Okay. Anyone else with anything else they'd like to share on this subject? Okay. Since I actually have a working mic now, we'll change subjects to the long-term effects of COVID on the QB community. And I think two subjects that we definitely want to talk about are the rise of online tournaments. So we can talk about how to prevent cheating in those, and also what the best practices would be for those. And then secondly, we could also talk about how to take care of yourself and your team, because I think this time self-care is very important and something that should be talked about. Erik, would you like to start with the second subject?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, this is a difficult time. I think for basically everybody, even if you're not personally, your day to day isn't as directly affected by what's going on in the world. There's still just there's a surreal feeling that kind of permeates everything, and it's just a little bit different, and it's something that almost no one currently alive can really draw from experience on, because of the scope and the effect it's had. In the Quizbowl community, we didn't have a national season this year, and that's unprecedented. It's something that nobody really saw coming, nobody really prepared for, or anything like that. So even if you're feeling okay about things, if your day to day is okay, it is still really important to make sure that you are taking care of yourself, whether that's just going for a walk when you need to clear your head, or having a conversation with someone you care about, making sure they're okay, they're making sure you're okay, that sort of thing is really important. Be nice to yourself. Give yourself some slack, because there are probably going to be days where you're not going to get a whole lot done, and that's okay. It's really okay to not be okay. Mental health is something that I talk to students about in other more normal circumstances as well, and one of the things that I like to mention is that for young people, high school and college students, mental health is a measurable issue for about 1 in 5, 1 in 4 even students. So that's one person for every Quizbowl team that at some point or another is going to have a pretty significant mental health issue at some point or another. So in addition to taking care of ourselves and allowing ourselves some grace and things like that, it's important to be reaching out to each other as well, and just making sure that we're not assuming that the person that you talk to every once in a while is okay. That it's good to reach out to someone you haven't talked to in a while, and just make sure they're good. They that they're not in need of something, but for one reason or another unwilling to just speak up and say, hey, I'm having a hard time. And by all means, if you are having a hard time and are having a hard time speaking up about it, make sure that you talk to someone. If it's a teammate or something like that, that's great. If you have a coach that you can talk to, as if there are issues going on at home and you can't really talk to family, then yeah, talk to a coach, talk to some other mentor or somebody like that. If you have absolutely no idea what to do, you can talk to me. I imagine you can talk to probably any of the folks on this panel if you just don't know who else to talk to. But understand that it's okay to talk about this stuff. It's okay to be open and to not be okay, because that's the first step towards getting better and taking care of what you need to. Because there can be things that need to be dealt with, and if you never deal with them for years and years and years, they can come to a head. I can speak to that personally, and it's so. Let's have conversations and take care of each other, and take care of ourselves.
I think with that, it's also very important to like mention that, recovery is, not only the hope, but it's the goal in most instances.
I'll talk about this because I deal with some of this myself. Improvement isn't a straight line. It's not like you're just going to go one way and this is going to always be better. Sometimes days will be worse, and I will admit that the past couple of months have at points been pretty hard on me personally from a mental standpoint. And what Erik said about taking care of yourself is very true. And if you're like me, that's not exactly what you're good at. You may have, been trained one way or another to not value self-care. And especially at this point in time, but in general, it's very important to practice that. So if you do need help, please get help. There's nothing wrong with getting help. It will help you. That's why it has the word help in there. Yeah, there's a lot of people in the Quizbowl community and that will help you. If you have a teacher you trust or a friend that you trust, please reach out to them. So it's very important at this point in time. Anyone else that wants to speak on this further things? Tora?
Yeah, I just have one quick thing building off of what everyone has said. I think it's also really possible to check in on others in a Quizbowl context too. If you have a tight-knit Quizbowl team, you can consider having, say, like, practice every other week over Discord or something like that, and take that as a casual chance to check in on each other and ask each other, how their day is going and how they're feeling about everything. And what I mean by having a Quizbowl practice is, to keep that leisurely and relaxed, and just have it be a chance for people to talk to each other and to blow off some steam from whatever may be going on for the rest of the week, as opposed to having something be very focused and very Quizbowl related. Because I think for a lot of people right now, it's hard to to see others in person or to interact with each other socially, and I think Quizbowl can be a good outlet for that if you make time for that.
Go ahead, Erik.
A very good thing to be able to do for someone who is in crisis or struggling mentally is to give is to provide something to look forward to. Put something on the calendar, literally or otherwise, just something to anticipate, to look forward to. So something like that, a regular practice or just something else. With Quizbowl as a central activity, or just Quizbowl people, is a great thing to be doing right now.
Yeah, we made sure that we continued practicing on this forum, whether it was Zoom or Google Meet. Our school uses both, and so we practiced. And one of our podcast episodes was actually about Quizbowl and quarantine and how to run practices through Zoom and Google Meet, and use buzzin.live, which used to be free, and it turns out last week when I needed it, it wasn't free. But it's an online Quizbowl buzzer that if you're using 8 people or fewer is free, and it's still a pretty cool app. And we actually started an online community of schools throughout the country that would scrimmage against each other, and it included plenty of schools in Illinois, like Barrington and Quest, and Texas, Kentucky, California, Florida, all over the country. We would scrimmage against each other, and we set up a schedule, and students or coaches were able to put their teams on as to when they were available. And so I had my team play 4 times a week. We would play, 4 matches a week, and it was something to look forward to, as you mentioned, Erik. And I guess I didn't realize that I was doing it for me as much as doing it for the kids, because I certainly look forward to coming down and moderating and interacting with the other coaches and the other players and stuff like that. But it really did help get me through the first part of this when there was so much uncertainty.
I wanted to pop in. I've been trying to mostly listen since I'm not a panelist this year. But I was that kid in high school who was all, no one understands me. I don't want to talk to a therapist because they're not going to get it. And I just want to say to all the high schoolers and the younger kids, and especially my LGBT Quizbowlers, don't wait. I waited till I was a sophomore in college, and my boyfriend talked me into going to student health because he could tell I was not okay. Thanks, man. Appreciate you. Don't wait. I have so much regret about the time that I lost to being more anxious than I had to be, more depressed than I had to be, going to bed at 9 o'clock because I needed to turn it off and turn it back on again with my brain. Don't lose the time that I lost. I love my life now. I'm living my best life. I wish I had started 10 years ago. And that's something I want for all of you. And if you don't feel safe reaching out to someone in your local community, if you're not sure you can trust them, whether it's because you're LGBT, whether it's because your college has a notoriously terrible mental health program, there are national resources as well. There are hotlines and there are text lines. And I'll try and coordinate with Erik to make sure that we link some of those in the description of this video when we put this video up.
And like, I'll go ahead and make the point about like with being kind to yourself. I know school is ending for a lot of people, but people might have Quizbowl goals or they might have summer courses. Just because you now don't have places to be, you don't have to be at school for 8 hours a day, it does not mean that you have to be 150% productive. Set reasonable goals for yourself and try to meet those every day. And if you don't get angry at yourself. Like, one thing that was like very hard with me was ending like my junior year of high school, was just having so much to do. But I made the general goal to get 2 to 3 things done a day, assignments completed, and then if I did, great. Now I'm not allowed to do anything else, and I have to do something fun. And I just be kind to yourself and realize that not everything you do has to be productive or in the name of some end goal. It's okay to sit back and watch 6 episodes of Sailor Moon in a row if you really want to.
Anyone else that would like to say anything? Yeah, in that case, let's shift a little bit. We'll still talk about COVID's effect, but let's talk about online tournaments. Does anyone have suggestions on best practices for hosting them or even participating in them? And also, any thoughts on cheating prevention? Because I know that's a big subject with these kind of tournaments.
So I ran with Will Alston the 2020 Internet Charity Tournament to replace ICT, and then I've helped direct and directed several other events since then. One thing to be very important with is clear and direct communication to teams regularly, and know your audience, know your team. If you're like, I ran Sun a month and a half ago. If you're running a set like that was a novice college set. In general, a middle school team asked me if they would like to play, and I spoke to their coach about it and determined that it would not be like a best fit for them. So make sure that teams, like a brand new team that's like never played like a Quizbowl tournament before, does not end up playing against, Tag and Stevenson or whatnot, when it's just going to be a miserable experience for them. And as far as like cheating prevention goes, like Zoom has proven to like not be the most effective due to like the points of human error, but Discord's like video integration. I'm planning on testing that in a few weeks, but for a tournament, but that video is a good deterrent, I feel like.
Yeah, we are at the time we're recording this in the throes of the Acronym League, which is a tournament that I'm running on the Acronym 13 set that came out this year, and there were a few different things we wanted to do to make this as user friendly of a tournament as possible. One is that we have been using Zoom, and a lot of that has been to telling people they have to be on camera. As far as we've been able to tell, has been a cheating deterrent, I think. But also just being able to see each other, I think adds a layer of authenticity and makes it feel a bit more like real Quizbowl. And I'm not saying that Discord is insufficient or anything like that. You know, going back to like IRC, done text-based Quizbowl stuff for a very long time, and it works. But it felt like being able to connect with each other in more ways than just text was a pretty big deal, and I feel like that's gone fairly well. Another thing that we did that I've been very happy with is when we were first taking signups. Basically, we picked out about a dozen dates and told teams what works for you. And then this is inspired a little bit by the Minnesota State High School Quizbowl League, where there are different divisions, and it's mostly geographical, but it's also so that any particular school's time commitment is minimized. So what we ended up doing for the acronym league is everybody split into a particular group, and then that group has 2 nights of prelims that are on the nights that they specified will work. Usually they're about 2 weeks apart, but then that way, there are a couple of nice things. Everybody has days that work for them, which is obviously important, but in addition to that, you don't need as much staff at once that way. You don't need as many rooms and that sort of thing. And so we have 54 teams in the league. Most nights we don't need more than 4 moderators, and that's great. That saves a lot of logistics as far as wrangling up people and that sort of thing. My other thing I really appreciate about Zoom, and I don't know that this is unique to Zoom, I just know that Zoom does it, is that you can enable a waiting room so that, like a real Quizbowl tournament, if one room finishes before another, the teams leave, head to another room. They don't just barge in to a game in progress or something like that. The moderator of the room sees, okay, teams are here, I need to speed up or what have you, and then when the time comes, you let them in, and that's been handy. Teams understand it. It's like going from one room of the Hyatt Regency O'Hare to another. It's fairly intuitive in that sense. I agree with Emily that communication is pretty important. At the beginning of each week, we send out an email to every team saying, hey, you have games this week. Here's the schedule again as a reminder. And then the day of each team's games, we send out a thing saying, your games are today. Here are the links to all the rooms. Here's the schedule again. Here's the reminders of everything else that's important, question security, how the rules work, that sort of thing. And it has worked pretty well for us, and I would encourage anyone looking into doing a online tournament of sorts to look at Zoom and look at compartmentalizing the tournament into groups so that you don't need to have everybody going at once.
And I'll make the point for tournament directors that do decide to run their tournaments on Discord is do literally as much work as possible before your tournament begins, so you don't have to worry about wringing out kinks when you're in the middle of round 6 and for some reason a team does not have access to the text channel for their room. Be very specific and meticulous when you're making stuff and setting stuff up beforehand so there aren't any errors and that teams don't get the tournament behind. And make sure you have a good staffing crowd, and if you run in and have 2 to 3 backup staffers or moderators, so in the event that someone's internet doesn't work or they simply don't wake up on time, that your tournament isn't completely thrown off. And as far as running tournaments on Discord do go, if you decide to run one, try to reach out to someone that's run one before. You're welcome to contact me to speak about this, but it's always good to have guidance so you can bounce questions off of, and with the tech platform, it's very important to be able to see what's going on and any concerns, because there's specific concerns with Discord that you might not think of if you're not running a tournament that are very important to consider.
Eric, what did you use as a buzzer system for your Zoom tournaments?
We decided to go with just the Zoom chat itself. We looked at the buzz-in that you mentioned, and a couple of teams had said we should maybe take a look at that. I understand that there's a new like game night buzz-in. I forget exactly.
Have they come out with it yet? Because they keep hyping it on Twitter, and I don't see it yet.
If we're talking about the same thing, it is out now.
Okay, good.
Checked it out. Ultimately, our decision came down to this, though. If they're already using Zoom, let's just have them use Zoom, because adding another browser window, another layer of complexity, having to go to a different site to buzz in, the moderator having to monitor that to buzz in, just adds another thing that can go wrong, and it makes it more complex for everybody involved. So we decided type the word buzz into chat and put that in. We've also started, after doing this a few times, encourage players to say the word buzz as they're buzzing in, just so that the moderator has an indication, oh, I should stop talking. I should stop giving information. And that has worked pretty well as well. Obviously, sorting out who said buzz first is not great, so it still has to come down to who the moderator sees as the first person to buzz in. It is not going to be as perfect of a system as an in-person buzzer system, but that just isn't an option. So I think for complexity reasons, sticking with doing that within Zoom is preferable to an additional platform of some sort.
Yeah, and Eric is 1,000% right. Simplicity is absolutely key. Like after Will and I ran the internet charity tournament online, people asked us questions about, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Our goal with setting that whole thing up was to make it as simple as possible. So if you're running an online tournament, have one stream of information communication, that all the information comes through that one place, so people don't have to check 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different places in order to be informed and aware of what they're going to be doing.
And also, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So like the difference, for the Zoom tournaments in particular, you talked about the importance of waiting room to prevent like people entering voice calls and stuff. Something that I know at least Grogranks have used for our tournaments, and I know Wayzati used for their Wait Online, is having, if you're in Discord, having separate voice calls for each room, for each round, because then there's no chance that you're going to run into a game that's already going on. And so that way it's also easier for the moderators, since they don't need to check if the previous round is finished or not. They'll know when people end their voice channels. And for the simplicity thing, Discord has server templates now. So all you need to do is just ask someone who's already run a tournament, and they can give you this little template to copy in, and you just have to change and then you can just paste that in. It creates basically a duplicate server, which is really easy, since now it takes basically no time to set up anything. And I guess going to the sorry, I'm saying a lot. But going to the cheater part of tournaments, obviously we know there's been a lot of cheating on packet readings and even in actual tournaments. Going into in the email, it shouldn't have to be said. People should have the common sense that this is an actual tournament. They shouldn't cheat. And I'm not sure reminding them will actually stop them from cheating, but it never hurts to just remind them that this is cheating and there will be consequences. At Grogranks, it's not an official list, but we have a sort of semi-list of people we're never going to allow play our tournaments because they've cheated on past packet readings, and we just don't trust them enough. And when you have this sort of excess staff that's just waiting around, they have nothing to do, and if they want to just spectate for tournaments, they could also act as sort of an extra pair of eyes and ears to see if there's any suspicious behavior. And some of this behavior, cheaters might not realize it, but it's pretty obvious sometimes when people are cheating. We didn't have this in our Blast Online tournament, but for example, in packet readings, if there's this toss up on this obscure play, let's say call it a visit to a small planet, and then someone buzzes first line, they're beating all these players who actually know literature, and they're clearly not a literature player. This is the sort of behaviors you can easily check, and you can innocently ask, and it's pretty clear when people are cheating.
And also, well, going way back, online tournaments can be a big opportunity for outreach because you can eliminate the transportation costs to and from your tournaments. However, I think recently there's been a big phenomenon where over 75% of the teams are very, very experienced and can put up basically 22, 23 PPV plus at the tournament. And suppose you want to get new teams there, having basically all their games be against teams like that would, like Chris Johnson's suggested earlier, might drive them away from future tournaments. I think a good idea would be to have more localized online tournament mirrors. Another benefit of this is that West Coast kids don't have to wake up at 7 a.m. to start an online tournament. They can start at like 9 or 10 a.m. and it can also run smoothly.
Yeah, that's definitely something to take into consideration moving forward with the state of whether or not Quiz Bowl tournaments are going to be happening in the fall, beyond, and like when can we start playing Quiz Bowl in person again? I know that Harris Bunker with like Sun to like regain revenue from loss that was lost from all the mirrors getting canceled this fall has been encouraging regional mirrors. Like there was one run in Pennsylvania, I believe, recently. And then there was 2 open ones, but in the future going forward, having smaller, not necessarily smaller, but more regional online tournaments might be better as opposed to like having a whole national thing. Or do you limit field? Do you have eligibility restrictions? Like these are all questions to consider when deciding whether or not to host a tournament going forward.
Anyone else
Okay.
with thoughts? Oh, go ahead.
So like, I guess this is another thing, like if going way back into discussion, people are discussing like being able to remind the moderators when you've buzzed and stuff. So when you, like, let's say you don't have a scorekeeper. So as a moderator, you have to have a tab open for your packet. You have to have a tab open to read Discord. You have to have a tab open to scorekeep. And obviously switching through 3 tabs is not going to be incredibly easy when you're a moderator. And I know for Callisto Online, the tournament director, like in his like video to the moderators, instructed them on ways they could like organize their screen to best optimize it. And I'm also like Matthew Tang from Unilab. He created like this application, which is sort of like it's a packet, but you could scorekeep onto the packet itself by clicking the word where people buzzed on and marking how many points they got on it. And that's what we use for the Blast Online General Mirror, because it just made it easier to like not have scorekeepers. And then it also has extra fun stuff where we can like track where people buzz. So if in case there's like cheating allegations, we can like look up basically where they buzzed and stuff. So I don't know, I guess like how would you guys suggest like future technologies without like making it overly burdensome and making like and with zero cost, extra cost to run the tournaments? What would you guys like do to make these tournaments more easy to run?
I'll say just go having your moderators split windows. So you throw your Excel spreadsheet and Discord over here, and your packet on the left. So you're not like constantly tabbing through things, like all tabbing. Split your screen and take advantage of the real estate that you have on your screen to be able to see all these things at once.
Yeah, when we get ready, I mentioned that we send something out to teams every day when they have games. We also send something out to moderators every day. And one of the noting, basically we set up a document that has everything staffers will need: links to packets, links to score sheets, links to schedules, and then just regular reminders for whatever it is they might need. And one of those is, before you start, make sure you can see all of these things that you need to see at once. Make sure that you line things up in such a way where you can read out loud and see when someone, and be able to see right away when a buzz comes in, that sort of thing. So doing that is great. And Arjun, the thing you're describing sounds amazing, and I would like to know more about how that works, because that really does seem like a good way to kind of automate keeping score, and then also stuff like conversion data which is useful for Quizbowl in general, makes that super easy, and perhaps makes protests easier to resolve, that sort of thing. So something like that, where the text is guiding what is happening and where points are being scored, and things like that, seems like a very logical and useful evolutionary step in running Quizbowl online.
Also, one of the things I've been working on for, I guess, the past month now was developing a sort of Google Sheets spreadsheet, score sheet tracker, where you can track how far in every room each toss-up, each game is, as long as the scorekeepers are continuing to keep score. I'd be happy to give a copy to any GD that's interested in running the tournament or would like to make their tournament easier to handle, basically.
All right. Anyone else that has anything they'd like to add? All right. Well, we have been going for 2 hours, so I think we'll call it a night here. I want to take this moment to thank everyone for participating and for putting your time in for your panel. So thanks to every one of our single panelists. I also want to thank Athena for working on the tech side of things, and for Sam for helping out. So Matt, Emily, Tora, Erik, Arjun, Ashish, Chris, and Ken, thank you all. Really, really appreciate it. I hope you all have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Take
Yeah,
care.
one more time on behalf of PACE, I did want to thank everybody for being here. If you're watching this recording or if you're reading a transcription, thank you for engaging with it. I'm glad we were able to do this year.
Thanks for having me.
And I just wanted to say, in case I didn't make this clear earlier, that when I was speaking about low-income students, I don't speak about this from like an outsider looking in. I speak as someone that's like experienced these things. So like trust that these are the things that students go through and that people need to understand and be aware of.
And again, for real, if you're take care of yourselves. If you're having a hard time, please talk to somebody. It's never too late. It's never not worth it. Just do it.
And there's absolutely no shame in reaching out for help at all.
None whatsoever.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good night.